Did anybody else see that movie The Shallows with Blake Lively? That was a pretty great shark movie. Not gonna lie, no denying that. That being said, it was definitely inspired by another shark movie, which we're gonna be talking about. Hi, I'm jacobtsuggs and welcome back to another video. And I was at the beach a few weeks ago and I was just having fun and hanging out with my family, and I actually shot this entire video at the beach, but the thing is, I didn't really like how it turned out, and I didn't have my lights, so my quality was just kind of bleh. And I didn't want the quality to be so freaking bad, so I was like, I'm just gonna go home and wait and get all my thoughts together and film this professionally. And I was talking to one of my friends, Justin, who runs a movie kind of review channel called TheCynicalCypher on Vidme and on YouTube, so go check him out. But I was talking to Justin and I was like, hey, I like Jaws. Do you like Jaws? And he was like, yeah, I like Jaws. And we decided to collab on the video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to air Justin's thoughts on Jaws first, and then I'm going to talk about Jaws, in my opinion, and why it means so much to me, and why it breaks traditional horror rules. And Jaws is just a great movie, and if you haven't seen Jaws, watch it before this video. This isn't a totally worth watching. I might say a few spoiler things, so just keep that in mind. That being said, it's a great film. It's a great Spielberg film. What else do you want? Just go check it out. So that being said, Justin, take it away.
Jaws is well recognized as one of the best and most influential horror movies ever made, and that's for good reason. It's always been the go-to example of horror movies that use a slow build-up of this creeping, imminent fear to create genuine horror in audience members around the world, including myself. As a 6-year-old that just so happened to accidentally stumble upon the movie one night, it became difficult for me, like most other kids that had seen the movie far too early in their lives, to even approach the beach. One might even say that me taking a bath became a near impossibility, but that's just how effective the film was. In a rant I feel I've become all too familiar with, the vast majority of horror movies don't care to take the time to build up their horror and instead just create this meaningless pop of fear in the form of a jump scare. What this film does differently is having what I feel is the best virtue for a film to have, which is patience. It uses every minute of its slightly over 2-hour runtime to build up this beast as a menacing freak of nature, up until the climactic finale where Jaws and the crew face against one another. But how does this film benefit from its patience? Well, the most notable benefit is the fear factor that is implanted into the audience members from not seeing Jaws up until the very end. One thing most horror directors seem to have lost sight of is how to make people fear something, and I'll tell you the secret right now. The thing that makes people fear the most in any scenario is their imaginations, and the thing that people fear the most is the unknown. Just think about it. As a child, you were way more terrified of everything because everything was unknown to you. You feared the dark because you never knew what was in there, so because of that, your mind filled in the blanks and said that any multitude of things was in that dark corner of your room. I know that for me it was Danny DeVito. So when you have this thing in the ocean that you don't see for over an hour, again your mind starts to fill in the blanks as to what it is and what's going on. And that of course makes Jaws all that much more terrifying. Although it probably still wouldn't have worked nearly as well if the film didn't use its characters the way it did. Probably the best way to build a character in the film is to make them as relatable as possible. Of course there are exceptions, but this familiarity with the character just makes it that much easier to connect with him or her. And this film accomplishes that pretty well. We have a character in Martin Brody that we root for throughout the movie because of his relatability and aspirations. Here's an example of how this works. In the opening scene of the film, Jaws devours that one girl. We basically know nothing about her and she dies immediately. This is basically a throwaway kill to plant the seeds of fear in an audience as to how massive and terrifying this creature is. When it comes time to the finale, we're no longer talking about throwaway characters. We're talking about characters that have been developed and we're rooting for. Of course, because of that, we want them to survive, making the scene that much more tense because we know what Jaws is capable of and still manages to surprise us. That unpredictability, the massive scale, the patience, all of these factors combine into making a powerful and feared entity that has haunted our psyches ever since.
Link to Justin's channel will be down in the description below. Cynical Cypher. Go check him out, go give him a like, and he's a really awesome guy. Definitely go follow him on Vidme and subscribe to him on YouTube. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. The guy makes amazing content. I just want to say that a few years ago, I saw Jaws for its 40th anniversary on the big screen, and I told my friend at the time, like, dude, it's gonna be good, and we're gonna recognize why it's great and a good piece of cinema, but I don't think it's gonna hold up as much anymore. I mean, the film was made in 1975, it's 2015, it's not gonna hold up. But to my surprise, oh, it holds up. Enough to where when I went to the beach a few weeks later, I did not go swimming in that water, I'll tell you that right now. LOL, Jacob, you're such a wimp! 1, shut up. 2, the movie's great, and if a movie scares me that bad, says something about a film that was made, a long time ago. And I'll actually never forget the first time I saw Jaws was actually when I was staying at the exact same beach house that I was in a few weeks ago, which I don't know why I decided to watch it with my friend Marshall there, but we watched it and we were terrified. Also, keep in mind we were like 11 and 12 at the time, so watching it as an 11 and 12-year-old, it's pretty frightening. I first off want to mention that when making this film, Spielberg had a lot of problems with the animatronic shark. It just wasn't looking real and raw and didn't feel like this massive threat because you could tell it was just an animatronic or this thing floating in the water that wasn't real. And then Spielberg came up with the clever idea of showing the camera from the shark's perspective, swimming upon its victims, which we all know has become extremely iconic and extremely terrifying. And when it comes to filmmaking and the technical, practical aspects of filmmaking, that's the kind of stuff that I admire and really inspire me, because I want to tell big stories in little ways, and it just goes to show that your budget doesn't define how your film's going to hold up in the years that it lives on. Granted, Steven Spielberg did use the animatronic shark here and there, but the shark isn't shown that much in the film. And when it is showcased, it's done so for a significant reason.
Slow ahead. I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chum some of this shit.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
I feel like horror movies today are forgetting something, and this is why the majority of horror films today are crap. Don't get me wrong, there's good horror films that still come out. I still see scary movies that I really can admire and appreciate because they put a lot of effort and time into making the film. With a few exceptions, scary movies today have a massive problem of showing the scary thing too much or too early. What I mean by that is, you see the monster way too much. But the monster's scary when it's left to interpretation. For example, let's talk about one of my favorite thriller / science fiction horror films ever, Alien, directed by Ridley Scott. But in Alien, the reason why the xenomorph is scary is because you barely see it. It's dark, it's cloudy, it's misty in this ship, and it blends in with the environment. For the majority of this film, you're just wondering where the xenomorph is. Is it there? Is it here? We don't know. We're as terrified as Ripley is in the film. And we're rooting for the human characters because the xenomorph is all the more scary because we haven't seen it very often. And Jaws does that in a really, really great way as well. By showing it from the shark's perspective, which is what I mentioned earlier, you're not seeing the shark, but seeing what the shark is seeing. And whenever you do that, you're not seeing the thing that you're supposed to be afraid of, but rather seeing a first-hand experience of what's happening. And barely showing something and showing something in a different perspective makes it all the more scarier, which is why I can appreciate Jaws. And I think that both Jaws and Alien, but primarily Jaws, definitely brought this idea and pioneered this idea of horror onto the genre that really hasn't been, exposed before. Up until that point. Granted, found footage films became horror because they capitalized on that idea of barely seeing something and shooting something big in a little way. Another reason, though, why I care for Jaws and why I think Jaws is just this really excellent film is because we actually care for the human characters. Another trope that the horror genre has kind of fallen into is just making disposable, one-dimensional characters that we actually want to see get killed and not escape, which is what we should be rooting for. In Jaws, you care about Chief Brody and you care about Quint. You don't want them to die, you want them to live on and take out the shark. Because the shark is a menace to be reckoned with, and since we've barely seen it, it's all the more terrifying. And they're out in the middle of this void, aka the ocean, and so they're in the danger zone, literally and metaphorically. Fact of the matter is that we're caring for these characters. We don't want to see them die like we would in a generic, troped horror movie film that would come out, in like 2017. And when you combine Jaws with the great characters and overall cinematic quality and practical quality, I think you really have something special. And John Williams' score adds so much to this film as well. If you haven't heard the score for Jaws, definitely listen to it. And the next time that you watch the film, you're probably going to have more respect for it and kind of understand like why you're feeling certain ways. I mean, everybody knows the iconic theme song, but not everybody knows the entire score, which I think is something to definitely listen to in your spare time. Trust me, it's really great. I just love how Jaws pioneered this new wave of horror films and thrillers in general, and I just really admire that, ingenuity behind the filmmaking, and that's the kind of stuff that I really appreciate when it comes to making movies. In the end, if you haven't seen Jaws, I can't stress to you enough why you should watch it. If you're a fan of horror films and thriller films, you're definitely going to get something out of this. And I think it just goes to show you that you can make something on a really small budget absolutely terrifying. Because when a movie that came out in 1975 still holds up today, I think that speaks volumes for the quality of the film. So that being said, what do you think of Jaws? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Let me know down in the comments below. And with all of this being said, definitely go subscribe to the Cynical Cypher, link in the description down below. And as always, please like, comment, and subscribe. I'm FrameByFrame. Remember the name, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys.